My name's Paul McKibben, and this presentation is entitled Help, I Inherited a Drupal Site. This is going to be a fairly broad and not deep presentation. I did not really assume any prior Drupal knowledge in this, thinking that there might be a few people in here that are very new to Drupal and are coming to DrupalCamp because they're in this kind of situation and need to learn more. So anybody here, are you currently in a situation where you've got a Drupal site that somebody else built and you're trying to make sense of it? Okay, we got one. Got somebody else nodding their head over here. If you are in this situation, what's your Drupal experience level? Are you new? Are you somewhat experienced, or very experienced? Very over here. How about you?
New.
Very new.
I have content management system experience.
Okay.
But not Drupal specifically.
Great. Well, I hope there's nuggets in here for everybody, regardless of your experience level, or regardless of whether you're in this situation now or will be later. But feel free to stop me at any time and ask questions. I prefer to do kind of a loose presentation, and if we need to go somewhere that the presentation's not, I'm happy to do it. So here we go. Like I said, I'm Paul McKibben. I have been working with Drupal since about 2007. I was previously with MediaCurrent, but I run my own consultancy now called Turbojet Technologies. And in my experience, I've implemented sites ever since Drupal 5 all the way up to Drupal 8. And I have inherited a few sites along the way and have encountered all sorts of fun things, and I'll share some of that here today. So the situation that this presentation is geared around, you have a client, or maybe it's your boss, that hands you a new site and says, here, maintain this site that this previous developer did for me. So don't panic. You can do this. We'll help you get through this. We'll cover some Drupal basics for those who are new to Drupal, and then start getting into how to determine what state your site is in. Learning how your site works, how the previous developer somehow made this thing go. And then discuss some pitfalls and bad behavior that I've run into in the past, and any of you can share your war stories as well. So first, some basics. Kind of an aerial view of how Drupal works. Drupal is typically installed on a LAMP stack. LAMP is Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. Doesn't necessarily have to be LAMP, but probably 98% of the world's Drupal sites are on a LAMP stack. There's actually been some Windows implementations out there with Microsoft IIS, and there have been other web servers. Yeah, I agree with you. But by and large, it's going to be LAMP. Within Drupal, you have Drupal core software. You have modules and themes, which I'll get into what those are in a second. All that code allows you to manipulate the site's configuration and content in a MySQL database. So unlike coding HTML files by hand and putting your content in those files, all the content's in a database, and the Drupal code actually pulls the content from the database and presents it to the user. Some terminology. So I mentioned modules. Modules are code packages that extend Drupal's capabilities. So those of you who are familiar with Drupal, some of the modules that you might run into are views, which is actually part of Drupal core now in Drupal 8, but web form, which allows you to build contact forms and other kinds of forms in your site, panels, which is a layout module. And there's actually around 30,000 plus contributed modules in the Drupal community. So we have those. Themes are code packages that influence how Drupal displays your content. And Drupal considers it very important to separate functionality and presentation. So that's why you have this concept of module and theme. There are also install profiles, which are packages that tie Drupal core, a bunch of modules, and maybe a theme together for a specific purpose. And you'll see profiles out there like Commerce Kickstart, which ties a bunch of Drupal commerce modules together with a few other community modules to have it easy for you to set up an online store. Or Panoply, which bundles in panels to allow you to create custom layouts. Any questions about this terminology? So my presentation, we'll talk about Drupal versions 6, 7, and 8. If you actually have run into something prior to Drupal 6 at this point, it's very, very rare. Any Drupal 5 site that I've ever worked on has since gone away, but I still see Drupal 6 out there. Drupal 8 is the current release. It was released about a year ago, and the latest release of Drupal 8 is 8.2.1. Drupal 7 was released, was first generally available in 2011, and its latest release is 7.51, and it will continue to have community support and releases, Drupal 7 will, until Drupal 9 comes out. And really, there's no idea yet when Drupal 9 is going to be. It's going to be years from now. Drupal 6, end of life. The community no longer supports Drupal 6. The final release was 6.38, which was early this year. There are some companies that still provide long-term support, and there's a project on Drupal.org called D6LTS, Drupal 6 Long-Term Support, where there are people in the community providing security patches and such. So if you are maintaining a Drupal 6 site and don't want to go through the pain of upgrading it to 7 or 8, there are still resources for that. It's probably a bit of an eye test chart, but this is kind of a high-level view of how the Drupal code is organized. You have all the core files here at the Drupal root. You're not supposed to touch these. If you have an install profile, the install profile code would go in this profiles directory. The code you are supposed to touch, or the places where you're supposed to put your custom code and your any modules and themes you download, are under the sites directory. Typically, it's under sites all. I'm not going to go deeply into multi-site, but Drupal does support a multi-site capability, and when sites all means these things apply to all the sites in the multi-site. If you have a single site, then all your sites is your one site. Typically, you'll put your downloaded modules in the modules directory. Experienced developers will actually put a contrib and a custom directory under modules. You don't have to do that. Many developers don't, but I find it helps organize things. So modules that you download from Drupal.org, you put in contrib. Modules that you code yourself, you put in custom. And then either your custom or contributed themes will go in the themes directory, all under sites all. Files that get uploaded through the use of your site will get put in, usually in sites default files. Images, documents, anything else that might get uploaded when somebody uses your site. And then there's a settings.php that contains your configuration specific to your site. For example, the database connection parameters, the base URL of your site. Those are the kinds of things that are particular to your site that you can change. So again, bad practice to change these, perfectly fine to manipulate these. Questions? All right.
I would like to mention for the new users of this that pay special attention to permissions.
Oh yes, yeah. File permissions. Your web server needs to have permission to write to the files directory in particular. That gets people caught up quite a bit. Drupal 8, if you happen to inherit a Drupal 8 site, they've streamlined it a bit. The core files have a much smaller footprint in the root directory. They're all underneath these. The modules directory is in the root directory now, and yeah. And then you still have your site's default files and settings.php and such. Makes it tougher to put the customizations in the wrong place. So what you want to watch out for when you inherit a site is people putting customizations in the wrong place. I will say that I have seen people put their downloaded modules here, and they'll intermix downloaded and custom modules here, making it very difficult to figure out which ones are community contributed modules and which ones are custom. So something to watch out for. Finally, I want to mention Drush. I'm not going to go into how to install or use Drush, but something that you definitely, if you're maintaining a Drupal site, you're going to want to learn about. It's a command line resource for Drupal. Lets you perform a ton of administrative tasks, some of which there's really no web interface for, especially when it comes to site audit tools. So highly recommend you downloading and installing Drush if you haven't already. Relevant resource links are right here. So, any questions on the basics that I've just covered? So next we're going to get into checking under the hood of your site. And let's hope it doesn't look like that. So some of the things, when you first get your inherited site and start trying to dig into it, can you log in? Amazing. Sometimes when I've gotten a site where all the person that gave it to me has is their own login, which lets them do some limited things, but not any of the administration privileges. You'll want to know what Drupal version you have. You'll want to know if you're using an install profile and which profile it is, what modules are installed, and then I'll also cover the status report in this section. So, logging in, you really want to be user number one. Drupal has this user ID system, and user number one automatically can do everything. So when you install a fresh Drupal site from scratch, user number one is created at that time. However, if you're inheriting somebody else's site, you want to become user number one. If you have access to the previous developer, or if the person who's asking you to maintain their site has the information already, get those credentials. But many times you can't get them. I've got a couple techniques that I've used to get around that. If you've installed Drush, there's a Drush user login command. So if you have access to the server the site's running on, or if you've already created a local copy, you can use Drush user login to get a password reset link into your site, and that will get you user one access. If you can't do that, maybe you're on a shared hosting server without a shell on it, or can't get Drush working on the server yet, but you do have database access, maybe through phpMyAdmin, you can change the email address of user one in the database, and that's how you do it. And then use Drupal's password reset tool to email you a password reset link. If that doesn't work for some reason, there are a bunch of other ideas and suggestions and approaches at the link at the bottom of this page. Again, I posted a SlideShare link. I'll post it again at the end of the presentation, so you can download this. You don't have to furiously copy down the link. So you've logged in. Now you got to find out what version of Drupal you have. Status report is one of the easiest places to do that. It's at your site URL /admin reports status. That will tell you at the very top what version of Drupal you have. And in this example, it's Drupal 7.50. And it will also tell you if you have an install profile. If you do, it will show that on the status report, and it'll tell you what profile you're using and what version it is. If for some reason you can't get in there yet and you still need to know the version number, like if you haven't been able to get the user one login, you can, if you've got access to the code, you can look at one of the Drupal core modules and look at the .info file, or in Drupal 8 it's the .info.yaml file, and get the version number from there. The status report, very useful for you to get kind of a big picture view of this site that's been handed to you that you now must maintain. Good things to know about it. When was cron last run? Does anybody know what cron is for on Drupal? Anybody want to tell us? Or I can tell you if nobody wants to tell us. But there's often maintenance tasks that Drupal must perform to the database. Different modules have different reasons that something that needs to be performed every at least once a day. And cron is a Unix utility that triggers that. Invokes the cron process on Drupal. So, for example, you might have something that mails out reminders on your site, and it only happens when cron is run. If cron hasn't been run recently, then those maintenance tasks haven't been performed recently. So that's something to know, that cron needs to be set up properly on your site. Another very important thing to know from the status report are updates available, especially security updates. If you are behind on security updates, your site may already be compromised by somebody. Any database updates outstanding. What that means is somebody updated a module or updated Drupal core, but didn't run the database update process afterwards. The update of the code requires a change to the database schema, but the the database updates hadn't been run to actually change the schema. You can also know your PHP version that's running, and it has a link to the PHP info configuration information. So it's great for debugging issues with PHP. Let you know what database type and version you're using. Is it MySQL? Is it MariaDB? What version? Some Drupal modules also add messages to this screen. So if you have, I can't think of any examples right off the top of my head, but there's certain modules that need special configuration, maybe access to a JavaScript library, and it hasn't been properly configured. The status report will sometimes show that. So this is a good way to get a quick view of possible problems with your site. As you peel the layers of the onion, one of the things you should know about your inherited site are what modules are installed. This modules page is at admin/modules. This lets you see what modules are available, which ones are installed. They're divided into packages, so these packages are up here like path management. Global redirect is the name of the module that's under path management. There's many, you'll see tons and tons of packages. You can expand and collapse them to see a view of, each module in those packages. There could be hundreds of modules installed on a particular site. Okay, any questions so far before we look deeper? Look at the iceberg under the surface here. So digging deeper now, you've gotten a picture of your version and what modules are installed. You want to perform a site audit. You want to really dig and find out what other problems might exist under the surface. Highly recommend before you get to this point that you set up a local copy of your site, or at least a test copy on another server if setting up a local copy is not feasible. That way, anyway, I'll get into the why in a little bit. But talk about setting up a local copy, tools for site audits, identifying if there's any code that's been hacked, if there are any security issues. And actually, I think we talked about the updates. No, I think I'll get a little bit more into that in this section. So setting up a local copy. Why do you want to do this? Because you don't want to be testing and making changes on the live server on the fly. You never know if you might make a mistake and take the whole thing down. Having a local copy or a test copy of the site means that you can try things and know that even if you completely break it, it's not going to affect the live site. In order to install a test server, you're going to need a local Apache, MySQL, and PHP stack. Depending on what OS you have and what tools you're comfortable with, there are many ways you can do this. Some people prefer to install Apache, MySQL, and PHP directly on their OS. Others prefer MAMP or WAMP or XAMPP. There's also Acquia Dev Desktop that's Drupal specific. And my personal favorite approach, is to install a virtual machine using VirtualBox. This lets me run a Linux server on my Mac. I actually use a project called Drupal VM that installs a virtual machine that's got Apache, MySQL, and PHP already pre-installed on an Ubuntu server. If you are comfortable with Vagrant, which is a virtual machine manipulation tool, Drupal VM is excellent. Got a link here at the bottom on Drupal.org for various ways to set up a local server. So once you have your AMP stack set up, you'll need a copy of the entire code tree from Drupal. Optionally, you can include the files directory with uploaded files. It really, you don't have to. For some sites, there may be videos and huge images that you don't want to spend the time transferring down from the server. An alternative to transferring those files is to install the stage file proxy module on your local site. That lets your local site pull individual files from the remote server as needed, as opposed to you downloading them all in one great big package. You'll also need a database dump from your live site. You can use the backup and migrate module for that, or if you're comfortable with PHP myadmin or MySQL dump or the Drush SQL dump command, those work perfectly fine as well. So now that you've got your test copy of your site, you'll want to install some tools for auditing your site. I'm going to talk about 4 different tools. One is the Hacked module, the Site Audit project, which is a Drush tool, the Security Review module, and the Drupageddon Drush tool. I'll get into each of these. So let's talk about the Hacked module. What does hacked mean in the Drupal world? One of the big mantras among Drupal is don't hack core, and one of the corollaries is don't hack contributed modules, meaning don't modify that code for your local purposes. The reason you don't want to do that is because it makes that code hard to maintain. You don't want to have to try and update something you modified. But Drupal veterans have probably seen this. Every time you hack core, God kills a kitten. Think of the kittens. Don't hack. The Hacked module allows you to detect if some of the code that you've inherited has been hacked. It's not perfect. I've had some failures with it, but it works pretty well. Here's an example report from the Hacked module is run from Drush. Once you install the Hacked module, you can invoke Drush hacked list projects, and you get a report like this. And in this example, it shows me that the previous developer made 9 changes in Drupal core and various changes in some of the other Drupal modules. So very good thing to know. You can then use other commands in the Hacked module, such as hack diff, to find out what were the specific changes. So if hacking is so bad, why does it happen? Usually it's an inexperienced developer who's desperate to get something done. And so, if I change this little thing in core, it'll suddenly work the way I want it. It's a problem because, well, what if you have a security update for Drupal core for your contributed module? Now you have to figure out either I've got to preserve this hack or code up an alternative the right way to get rid of the hack so that I can then apply that security update. Makes it really, really difficult. The right way to do this, instead of hacking core or contributed modules, is to actually use a custom module or theme and use Drupal's API to override functionality. Drupal provides a wonderful API. It provides a great hook system, theme templating system. You can pretty much override anything you want to with either a custom module or in your theme. So there should be no reason to hack a module. If you're fixing a bug in a module or in Drupal core, the proper way to do that is when you fix it, provide a patch file, report it as an issue on Drupal.org and provide a patch file so that that change is tracked, and then note that in a patches.txt file in your code base so that you can at least show what changes you've made and why and where it is on Drupal.org. So next I'm going to talk about the Site Audit tool. It's a Drush tool set. I have not used every option here, but it's actually quite a powerful set of tools. I have used a few of these, mainly for detecting security issues. I've done like the audit security command, for example. But you can audit some of these. Let you check, if your blocks are properly cached, if your Drupal overall cache settings are good. It'll even actually invoke the Google, the page speed insights tool for you. So it gives you a lot of information about your site that will help you identify problems, uncover issues. It'll even count like the number of content types you're not actually using, any modules you have in your code base that you're not actually using. It really kind of gives you a lot of tools to help you clean your site up. There's also the security review module that will give you kind of a deeper view of potential security issues with your site. This is an example of a site I recently inherited. So for example, the site gave untrusted roles administrative permissions. Oops, you don't want to do that. You don't want your content editor to be able to assign permissions to other users. Base URL and settings.php, that helps prevent phishing attacks. PHP files in the files directory. Ooh, that's not good. And then views without any access checks. So basically what that means is if the anonymous user knows the URL to this view and it's not meant to, not meant to be viewable by the anonymous user, they can go view it anyway. Next, I want to talk about the Drupageddon module and the Drupageddon exploit. How many of you have been through, were around when Drupageddon hit? Did any of your sites get hit? Ooh, yeah, not fun. This was the one time I have seen the Drupal community pre-announce a security release saying, watch out Wednesday, a big one's coming. And this one was big. What it did, well, I'll go through kind of what happened first. It happened on October 15th, and it was corrected in Drupal 7.3.2. It affected Drupal 7 only. The problem was somebody announced how to exploit this like hours after the problem was announced. And a lot of hackers took advantage of this recipe to exploit sites and went out and exploited a bunch of sites. Drupal sites that weren't promptly patched when this was announced got compromised. So if you've inherited a Drupal 7 site, it may have been a victim. It doesn't matter what version you were on if they didn't clean it up. What it was a security hole that in the database interface that allowed somebody to, anybody, to inject SQL. And the login screen was the exploit that the recipe was provided for, but it basically gave them a way to use the Drupal login screen to get access to the database and then gain complete access to your site and server. And then once they got into your server, they installed all this backdoor code, and then oftentimes they'd cover their tracks so that you wouldn't know they actually came in and did that. In some cases, they actually patched the exploit for you. Detecting whether your site has been exploited. This is a reliable way to, what I want to say is it's reliable in that if it gives you a positive, it is indeed a positive. There are no false positives with this tool, the Drupageddon tool. However, if it doesn't give you a positive, it doesn't mean your site was not infected. Makes sense? But definitely, if you inherit a site, run this tool to see if it shows any of the signatures of a Drupageddon hacker. If your site was exploited, read this URL about what you can do about it. It is definitely not easy to clean up, and in some cases there may be no point in trying. You may be better off just rebuilding and reinstalling your site from scratch. Okay, on to nicer things. So after you've gone through all those site audit tools, another tool that you can use is the available updates screen. One thing I've seen in many of the sites that I've inherited from other developers is that they disabled the Update Manager module, which is what warns you very plainly when updates are available. They decided that being warned when updates are available is just too annoying, and they don't want to know about it. But it's something that you should definitely keep enabled so that you can keep your site current, especially with security updates. Once the update module or update manager module is enabled, you can use this report here at admin reports updates to see which modules have updates. This shows, for example, I'm on Drupal core 7.50, but 7.51 is available. However, it is not a security update. It's just a code update. Here, this one's a security update. Chaos Tools Suite, way behind. There was a security update at 1.8, and then the current version is 1.11. You definitely want to make sure you keep up with security updates, and you really should keep up with all the updates. Really, the advantage to keeping up with updates, even if they're not a security update, is if there is a security update in the future, it's not as big of a jump. For Drupal core, these are the latest security releases, and then the latest releases on the line below that. A little terminology lesson of update versus upgrade, because people do get that confused in the Drupal world. An update is within the same major version, so within Drupal 7 or within Drupal 8. An upgrade means moving to a newer major version. In Drupal core, updates are pretty straightforward. Upgrades generally are not, because the Drupal core from major version to major version, the APIs are so significantly changed that upgrading from one to the next doesn't work except for the most basic of sites. And in fact, for Drupal 8, upgrades to Drupal 8 are not supported at all. You must do a migration instead. You install Drupal 8, build the site content types out, and then migrate the data. They stopped supporting automated upgrades. Here are some links on how to update Drupal core. Again, I'll have a slide share link at the end, so you don't have to rush and copy these all down. And then updating contributed modules is very similar to updating Drupal core. You replace the old module code and then run the update script, update PHP. So, any questions so far? So we've looked at all the reports, we've done site audits. Now we really need to learn how our site works. In the course of reverse engineering your site, what I'm going to do is go over some basic Drupal constructs. There's no way I can cover every possible Drupal construct out there, but this will get you started. And then provide a very basic overview of how modules and themes work. And I'm trying to keep an eye on the time because we're getting close to question time here. As far as knowing what Drupal constructs are being used in your site, a very useful tool is your browser's developer tools. Is anybody here, are they not familiar with the developer tools in Chrome or Firefox or Safari or the browser of choice? So most browsers, what typical browser do you use? Chrome, okay. There's Chrome developer tools. They're built right in. You don't have to enable anything that I recall anyway. And it makes it very easy. All you have to do is hover your mouse over the what you want to inspect in HTML, right-click, and then click the word inspect. And it will bring up this nice developer tool, either a pane or a window, depending on how you have your browser configured, with all the markup. And the markup will be highlighted where you've clicked to inspect it. Very, very useful when you want to figure out what piece of Drupal functionality is generating the markup. So the first construct I'm going to talk about is a node. Is there a question? Oh, no. Okay. The node is the most common way to represent content in Drupal. It's not the only way, but it's most common. It's an instance of a content type. Drupal lets you define various types of content, such as articles, pages, press releases, videos, or anything else you might want to define, recipes, anything. You define fields on it. It lets you structure your content. But what I'm trying to get to here as far as reverse engineering your site is that when you're looking at a page on your site, you can find out if that was generated by a node, or maybe a piece of content in a list of things. You can find out if that was from a node. So here's a site that I have not maintained in about 3 or 4 years now, but showing an example of a node page. This page was generated by a node. And I figured that out by inspecting the markup using the Chrome developer tools. What I was able to see is that the body has a class page node. And then further, it's page node 56. Well, what do you know? So it turns out that node ID 56 is what generates this page. So if I want to make changes to this page, I can log in and edit node 56 and change it. Nodes might also appear in lists. For example, if there's a blog or a press release page that lists all the press releases or the blogs, you can inspect the markup for the item in the list and see what generates it. In this case, node 56 again. Any questions about nodes? There's also blocks that are very common in Drupal. There are little boxes of content. You might find them in the sidebar or in the header or the footer. they're displayed in a selected region on a page. So Drupal themes divide a page into regions: header, footer, content, left sidebar, right sidebar, etc. And then you can use the block system to place blocks in specific regions on specific pages. So how do you identify a block? Well, again, use your HTML web inspector, hover over a piece of content, and what do you know? That's coming from a block. Then views. Views are, it's a contributed module in Drupal 6 and 7, and it's actually part of Drupal core in Drupal 8. But it's a way to list content. Most cases are going to be listing nodes. You might use it to list a bunch of press releases or blog posts. You might have a page that lists the executives of a company. You might have a slideshow on your homepage. That might actually be a view under the hood. You can learn more about views on this documentation page here. So this is whitehouse.gov, and I didn't have anything to do with this site. I thought, well, let me just see what kind of markup they have and see if I can spot a view. And lo and behold, I did. They've got a blog, and I was able to inspect the markup, and wow, it's a view, all right. And then finally, I'm going to mention panels. Panels had a bad rap for a long time, but it has really gained a lot of favor over the last couple years as a way to provide flexible layouts for sites. It's an alternative or maybe something to do in addition to using blocks. But basically what it does let you do is break up the content area of your page into panes and then put smaller pieces of content into those panes. There are several other modules in the panels ecosystem, such as Panelizer and mini panels. I'm not going to get into what's what exactly, but you may run into those in the course of maintaining a site. And then I got a link to some more documentation here. This is the Justice Network television channel website, and here's an instance of where panels are being used. This is actually a panel pane right here, and if you hover your mouse over that and inspect it, you can see that panels is what's influencing how this is structured. You can see it on now, Alaska State Troopers, etc., etc. Sometimes you can't figure out what's generating the markup. Maybe it's a custom module. What you can do is look at the URL path of the page. The URL path is everything after the domain of your website. And you can find out if a custom module, or any other module for that matter, is responsible for a page by seeing if the module implements that URL path, either in hook menu for Drupal 6 or 7, or in the routing.yaml file in Drupal 8. Here's just a quick example of hook menu. Basically, in this site, there was a claim organization URL. So whatever it is, .com/claim organization. That is how a module implements a URL. So you can see that way if you need to make a change to something that's generated by that URL. Oh, it's in this custom module. Themes. So again, themes are software packages that influence the display of your site, the appearance, the presentation. So when you're trying to unravel your site that you're maintaining, you're going to want to know what theme is being used. What you need to do is go to the admin appearance page, and you can see at the top what themes are enabled and which ones are the default. And then also, the administration theme may be different from what the end user sees. And so at the bottom of that page, you can see what is set as the current administration theme. Structure of themes. Drupal 6 and 7, you basically, this is a very high-level overview. I've got documentation links at the bottom to dig deeper. But in Drupal 6 and 7, there's a .info file that describes what the theme is, what it depends on, what regions are defined. In Drupal 8, it's .info.yaml, but basically the same kind of information. There's a PHP file that drives all the pre-processing for that theme. In Drupal 6 and 7, it's called template.php. In Drupal 8, it's whatever the name of the theme is, .theme. And then template files. Those actually set up markup. Basically, for example, if you have a node and you want to define how a node is displayed, the title uses an H1 and the body uses a div tag or an article tag or what have you. All of that is defined in the .tpl.php file, or some people pronounce it tipplefip. In Drupal 8, we don't have tipplefips anymore. We use Twig. Then all the CSS and JavaScript that influence the display are also in the theme. All right. Any questions about any of that? So we're going to move on to pitfalls, bad behavior, and war stories. Some of the stuff I've run into are modules installed incorrectly, modules that look like contrib but are not, business logic in the theme template, and if anybody else wants to share their war stories, this is a great place to do it. So I think I mentioned this earlier on. I've seen modules installed in the wrong place. Again, you want to make sure your modules are installed under sites all, or if you're doing multi-site, it might be sites/whatever multi-site directory it is. One of my favorites are modules that look like contrib but are not. I inherited a site that had an Acquia module. Who knows who Acquia is? So the founder of Drupal started the company Acquia, and it's kind of like the Red Hat for Drupal. I thought, I never knew that there was an Acquia module. I looked at it and looked at the code and thought, this doesn't look very good. The comments are poorly written, if they're there at all. The code's not indented nicely. Something's not right. So I dug deeper. I looked on Drupal.org, couldn't find an Acquia module, couldn't find any of these modules underneath it. What I eventually figured out was some guy in Italy sold this module package on a site called Envato, which I guess is really popular among WordPress people, where people sell plugins for a small price. Apparently, this guy made some money selling this on Envato. Sold the Acquia module. Yeah, I know. So I'm now stuck maintaining this code, and I've had to actually make some changes to it because of PHP errors and other things. But this really should have been a custom module and should have been called something other than Acquia. Also, some bad behavior I've seen in the past is in the theme templates, people put really complex PHP logic in there. The site in question, I don't have the example anymore because I'm no longer working on it, but it was a company that had a bunch of videos, and they put all the logic for their video players in the template file. Business logic, about who should access it, what roles, what, when. Stuff that if you ever change the theme, you're going to have to rewrite all that logic again. Really, there's a reason why the Drupal community values separating business logic from presentation logic, and that is so you can change the theme, because design standards and aesthetics and things like responsive design, for example, those things come very, very fast, and you want to keep up with it. You don't want to have to recode all your business logic every time you change your presentation logic. So, anybody else have war stories? Anybody else? Yeah.
Had a corrupted MySQL database.
Corrupted MySQL database. So, did it look corrupt at the time, or?
Well, the site was just completely foobar, of course, and it was a pretty large site. Ever heard of beerconnoisseur.com?
Yeah.
Okay.
Beerconnoisseur.com.
Had to restore that from a backup, but he had no sandbox or anything. It was like, well, so it's like it's like an all-nighter kind of crazy.
How old was the backup?
3 months.
Oh my gosh, a 3-month-old backup. Wow. Yeah, and I didn't think about that, but that's probably some good advice when you inherit a site is to make a backup of the database almost immediately.
The first thing you need to do.
Yeah.
Corrupt quick.
Yeah. Any other inherited site war stories? Okay.
I don't know what story it is or not, but it's a story about relationship between the web developers and system administration.
Mm-hmm.
They not allow us to change something inside team folders.
Uh-huh.
And they gave us some space inside all sites modules. They gave a new folder in this place,
Mm-hmm.
and this is our place for making development. My solution was I needed to update website, so I created custom module,
Mm-hmm.
and what I found, so I just able to change the whole look of the website using my custom module.
Oh, wow.
So it's like it could be a war story, so it's
Possible.
For the next guy. Yeah. Wow. So yeah. So the system administrator would only allow access to one particular directory under sites all modules. You couldn't change anything in the theme, and so you created a custom module to completely alter the way the site looks. So
I'll show him.
whoever inherits the site after that's going to have to reverse engineer that. That's going to be fun. Oh wow. All right. Anything else? Any other questions? Anything? Remember, you can do this. I know it's a lot, but if you inherit a site that has a lot of problems, you can get it done. Drupal.org/community is a great place to ask, to find resources where you can ask questions. It gives information on IRC as well as Drupal.org forums. Also, if you need professional support, DrupalJobs.com is great for that. You can also contact me. My information's here. And again, the URL to get to the SlideShare, tinyurl.com/help-drupal-site. Thank you very much.